Thank you for that, and also for the actual event too. I'm going to do two things because I've only got 10 minutes here. I'm going to quickly talk about the digital identity side of things, and then I'm going to do what I did at the event and slightly hijack it, and talk a little bit about some other stuff that's related to digital identity. But firstly, yeah, there was a major track at, as Will just said, the at the Cypherpunk retreat, around digital identity. And I was there just to quickly introduce myself. I run a small research organization, um, which is currently under attack. I'll talk a little bit more about that too. And as the head of research at the World Ethical Data Foundation, it was like a dual role that I was there. And what we found is that when the sessions came up, there was a really clean thread of digital identity, looking at things from threat modeling perspectives, looking at new approaches to everything from zero knowledge to interfacing with states, self-custody, things like that. And this is being filtered through the lens of what I do. What was clear about that was that there was a lot of people who, for the first time, had consensus about identity being difficult from a perspective of that the threat model had changed, the situation had changed in the world. And as a result of that, digital identity, which is kind of the cornerstone of a lot of digital systems, has reached a point where we need to rethink that very clearly, as again was just said on the stage here as well. And so there was a lot of discussion about the scope of that, but not as much discussion on solutions straight up. There are a lot of people there producing really great work and having maybe bits and pieces of the puzzles, but nothing quite cohesive in one big block. And I kind of want to sort of breeze into that a little bit and talk a little bit about what I mean here when I say like the irreversible brittle society, because I feel like there was this nice convergence between the work that I'm doing right now and the overall work that was happening in the discussions in the identity space. So as I said before, I run a research organization named New Design Congress, and I just launched a small R&D lab called Parareal Limited. That's my LinkedIn. But there's another QR code coming up in a second that's much more interesting. And when I was there, one of the big points of discussion was this report that's coming out pretty soon that we worked on at New Design Congress over the last 4 years, called the Digital Identity Event Horizon, which is a 4-year red team analysis of digital ID systems that show how digital ID systems create brittleness, exploitation, and enable abuse. It's an absolute banger of a document. It has 678 references, unprecedented access to 45 expert participants from military, intelligence, cybersecurity, policy, law enforcement, executive leaderships, and tech, including people working in electoral systems. And it also has 8 case studies looking at different digital identity systems from around the world, both emerging ones and existing ones. And it does this through the lens that digital identity creates brittle society because no digital identity defends against social engineering. What that means is that there's a separation logically between the authentication of a person and the human cognition of understanding that someone is who they say they are in the system. We're always, no matter what, whenever we have a digital system that has identity, we're always only looking at a representation of them, not them themselves. And so because of that, and because of the increasing sort of hostile data analytics and things like that, what we see are sophisticated attacks now that don't require any kind of technical ability, just your mom's credit card and some compute, and you can do some really crazy things. For example, what started historically as just like, a social engineering attack would be, let's take a email address and change one, like an L in an email address to a 1, and then email someone and pretend to be somebody else. It's a basic example of social engineering, but that worked so well. It's one of the reasons why email has, even though it's a federated system, consolidated into a handful of providers, because the trust that we required to have these systems could be easily defeated by simply pretending to be someone else in the subject line or from the sender line. And so things have gotten substantially more sophisticated since then. And in the report, we detail how biometrics, crypto, zero knowledge, all of these different systems get close to solving for this, but never quite make it. And so as a result of that, we are stuck in that situation. And so what I wanted to just quickly do, we've only got 10 minutes and probably already over. I wanted to just quickly not read, but I'm going to just jump over this from the report. So in the report around about finding 4, which talks about how emerging technologies are not examined very well, such as biometrics and things like that, and they lead to entrenchment before we get to really evaluate their potential consequences. And this is specific to some of the discussion that was had at the event. We talk about how in the run-up to Nayib Bukele's 2019 electoral victory in El Salvador, that there were a number of crypto maximalists who campaigned for Bukele and in Bitcoin and actually raised a lot of funds. And then after that, Tether moved their headquarters to El Salvador and raised a lot of money by basically opening up its reserves. And then there was a $1 billion bond issue that would be converted into Bitcoin for the state's treasury and bypass the IMF. And as a result of that, within 3 months of the Tether deal, Bukele passed the Bitcoin law. Some of you know about this already, which made cryptocurrency legal tender and for a brief period of time mandated that every adult needed to enroll in a biometric cryptocurrency wallet called Chivo, which then promptly leaked all of its user data. And this is a screenshot from a dark web forum with 144 gigabytes of personal data, including high-definition headshots and personal information, names, birth dates, addresses, and identity numbers for more than 5.1 million Salvadorians. And that is digital identity in a nutshell. But this gets more sinister, because simultaneously, while they were raising money, they're also building the CCOT mega prison. They started it in 2022 as this terrorism confinement center, which is 8 concrete blocks where cells designed for more than 100 inmates have 80 bunks, minimal ventilation, and 2 toilets. At capacity, each prison only has 0.6 square meters of space. In the 2 years since its opening, human rights groups have tracked mounting deaths. 2024 Christosial report states at least 265 detainees have died in it. And of course, as we know, this is where the Trump administration, which has direct connections to the people involved in El Salvador's rise of Bukele, immediately started shipping people with legal status to this prison in 2025. So what we have is an example of one of, unfortunately, the most successful Web3 projects that leverages digital identity to produce this system of a crypto carceral pipeline that takes the promise of crypto's libertarian future and then translated it into like a hard policy for authoritarianism. And so the problem here is that is the baseline, I think, that the digital identity track really operated under, as well as a lot of concern around the European equivalent, such as IDAS 2.0. And so if I just drop this out now, don't save. Okay. So this is kind of the takeaway. The most successful Web3 project built a crypto-carceral pipeline using mandatory biometric identity and blockchains. And this is what happens when technical execution outpaces political and privacy analysis. And this is something that, has been coming for a while and exists like even within the state, where people begin to crystallize this kind of threat and the fact that things have changed quite dramatically in the world for us. So if we want different outcomes and different legacies for Web3, personally, I think that I'm not too happy that that's the most successful sort of political project at this point in time in Web3, arguably. We must both understand what went wrong, that something so perverse is able to exist within this this community, this space, this promise of this technology, and then we need to design security architecture and defensive postures, red team the hell out of this stuff to prevent this political weaponization of Web3 entirely. And that was generally the underlying consensus, I think, of the identity track, was that it was incredibly interesting and also incredibly frustrating, because what we walked away with were no solutions, but at least a shared understanding that the problem is extremely serious in 2025. Thank you so much. And that is the report there. Oh, I didn't mention as well, the reason why I'm giving you a QR code is because we got a cease and desist about the report in August. So it's not a legitimate cease and desist, but someone doesn't like it very much. So it's not, the cease and desist doesn't say we can't, it says we can't publish. It doesn't say we can't share it. So I'm sharing it.